this morning's talk. It's a little heavy. Why is it heavy? Well, because it's the true teaching. And it is definitely not for the faint of heart. It is definitely about the core of one's being and how the teaching evokes from that core a desire to be somebody better. The thing is, it's not to be a better personality. It's not to be more popular. It's not to be the most liked person on the planet. It has nothing to do with those kind of elements. We could even say that when we think about the core of our being and you juxtapose it alongside of reincarnation and the future, it is how are we going to confront ourselves to release the potential from the core of our being in such a way that we are no longer hung in a noose by this planet and by the idiocies of humanity and the vanities and egos of those who are still living in darkness. And this is the other thing about darkness. We are really, as a humanity, we are really as disciples, as aspirants, caught in a horrendous battle between the forces of darkness and the forces of light. The challenge for disciples and aspirants is to stay in the light. To stay in the light. And what does that mean, to stay in the light? It means to stand on your principles, to live higher values, to be an expression of the virtues of the lotus. At the same time, we are living this life over here by standing in the principles, living in the light, placing our entire being on this measure and standard of virtues, and especially the virtues of the lotus, while we are working on releasing more of the potential from our core, so we don't come back life after life after life with this noose around our neck, meaning that we become imprisoned by ego and vanity and the insanity that we see in the world. So we are challenged, and that challenge comes through the tests of their probationary path, which is what I'm talking about this morning. What is so interesting, as I've studied over the years about their probationary path and lived it, it's a very long path. It's not a probation like for example, you get a job and you're put on a 6-month probation or a 3-month probation. At the end of that time, you're reevaluated and you're either kicked out or now you've got a solid job. It's not like that. It is a probation that can last for several lifetimes. also, which is curious and perhaps even mysterious, is that when you are really committed to that probationary path, it becomes longer. So you have to really think about that. And once you understand it, you're going to be grateful for it. I think the reason for the extreme length based on perhaps earthly time, is because once we move off of the probationary path, onto the path of initiation, the true path of initiation, once we're on that path of initiation, all that we do and say and become becomes so influential to the evolution of and progress of humanity that if we make one mistake, we go back and fail. Go back in this way. We become immersed in what's called the retrogressive forces once again. So you don't want to become immersed in retrogressive forces once again. You don't. So that's why I think the more committed we are to the probationary path, the great ones oversee us. And they recognize we need a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that, a little bit more over here. And so the path extends itself until we really, really are ready. We're really prepared now to go through the initiations. And when I talk about initiations, I'm not talking about the first and second initiation. I'm talking about the third, which is the Transfiguration initiation. And according to the Tibetan's teachings, he says that the first and true initiation is the third. And of course, that makes it real fun when you're reading his books. Which first is he talking about? But you soon learned what it is. Master Moria says, if you do not have the patience, stamina, and fortitude to withstand the tension of certain tests, the path of probation is not for you. He says it is better to drop out than to continue. So in many ways, the probationary path is more important than the path of initiation, because it is the path that we build our foundation. We look at our children today that are now adults, let's say, and we see in so many of our grown-up kids mistake after mistake after mistake they keep making in their life. And as parents, we wonder, what is going on? Well, I think in part it's the education system. They're not giving our children time to build a strong foundation. See, a foundation in ethics, a foundation of values, a foundation of virtues. Even simple foundation of respect your elders. Teenage children today, and I'm speaking in generalities, of course, do not respect their elders. They look at their elders as old people, insignificant to themselves. They don't follow instruction, they don't follow advice, and they don't respect. Why is that? Because they don't have that foundation yet. So, when we look, we're going to step this up a bit now into the spiritual world and say, all right, if the core of my being, as I'm releasing the core of my being and all the potential that is in this core, I want to be standing on a firm foundation. So if I make a decision that will affect my family or my country or my humanity, that it is going to be the right decision. See what I'm saying? So, foundation is so important. And thus, probation, the probationary path, puts our life in order. The Master Kutumi, he wrote this. He said to be accepted as a Chela on probation. Now let me interrupt myself a minute. Some of his language is old. You know, this is going back about 125 years when he wrote this. So bear with the language. He says to be accepted as a Chela on probation is not an easy thing. To become an accepted Chela, a Chela is a pupil of a spiritual teacher. To become an accepted Chela is to court the miseries of probation. And who today, who of our teenage kids will court the misery of anything? And then you look at yourself as an adult, and almost the same thing is happening. To court the miseries of probation requires humility and the desire to grow and expand as a soul. And the way we do it is through the wisdom of illumination. The teacher, the teachings. He goes on, Master Kutumi goes on to say, life in the ordinary run is not entirely made up of heavy trials and mental misery. The life of a Chela who offers himself voluntarily is one long sacrifice. Now this is Master Kutumi. He says, he who would control hereafter the events of his life, here and beyond, has first to submit himself to be controlled. Yet triumph over every temptation, every woe of flesh and mind. He says the Chela on probation is like the wayfarer in the old fable of the Sphinx. Only one question becomes a long series. I'm going to repeat this. Only one question becomes a long series of everyday riddles propounded by the Sphinx of life, who sits by the wayside and who, unless her ever-changing and perplexing puzzles are successfully answered, one after the other, impedes the progress of the traveler and finally destroys him. Pretty heavy stuff. This is from a master. Now, if you juxtapose this alongside of what Master Moria says, it is better to drop out than to continue. And you put these two together, these two instructions. This is why I said at the beginning, this is not for the weak of heart. The probationary path is one characterized by an intense preoccupation with duality. What is duality? It's the pairs of opposites, such as attraction and repulsion, likes and dislikes, and even two different viewpoints. The person has come to a point over many lifetimes of evolutionary travel to a realization now that the soul is existing within himself. The light of the soul, capital S, the light of the soul is being occasionally experienced now. And thus comes a predictable effect with the pairs of opposites within his or her nature. I'm going to repeat this again. The light of the soul is being occasionally experienced, and thus comes a predictable effect with the pairs of opposites within his or her nature. The Master Tibetan explains the pairs of opposites in this way. He says that there are essentially three stages of confronting the pairs of opposites. And as we deal with these pairs of opposites, it puts us on the path of liberation. See, of releasing more and more beauty and light and love from the core of our being. Now, this is what he says. He says, on the physical plane, this is the first battle that the ordinary man confronts. It is called the battle which is fought out on the path of purification. Now, you can study this and think about it for a year, but as an idea to consider is that once that individual becomes aware that there really is a soul inside himself, then his conscience becomes intensified. It can be painful because now what is he confronting in these pairs of opposites on the path of purification is many, many, many lifetimes that he has lived up to this point. So it is the accumulation of what he carries with him up to this point that is now going to be purified. It's like spring house cleaning in a very simple way to move on to the next battle. And the next battle is the battle on the astral plane. And this is the path of probation. This is the true path of probation, is that path on the astral plane where we are confronting well-known dualities. So it is, as we are on this path of probation, is when we begin to fight the dualities on the astral plane. Then the next pairs of opposites is on the mental plane where we deal with the angel and the dweller. And this is fought on the path of initiation. So today I'm talking about the path of probation and the well-known dualities on this path. It is on the probationary path where we are challenged with and fight against the well-known dualities, such as, I'm going to skip through some of this here because of time. Okay, this is a point where on the astral plane, things become pretty complex for us. For we first have to disassociate our own aura from the emotional sense of our surroundings. We have to disassociate our own aura in the emotional sense from that of our surroundings. How many of us can do this? Oftentimes, I see those in the spiritual community on this path thinking that they have accomplished this, but in essence, what they are doing is they are freezing, creating a numbness of sense. So they don't have the courage and they don't have the daring to allow, these emotional situations to be recognized and to understand the underlying cause, and then to disassociate the aura from these situations. What does this mean? It means now you're using the light of the higher mind, analyzation, and more. So it takes quite some time to learn how to do this, but this can be done by learning discrimination in the non-racial sense. It means using the mind as an analyzer and a separator through which our astral body is what? It's brought under control. In Torgrim Serdarian's writings, I think it's in the Symphony of the Zodiac, where he tells us that such a small percentage of humanity has built their emotional body. This is exactly what he is talking about here. And next, for us to remember, the astral plane is a plane of illusion and of glamour and of a distorted presentation of reality. Individual desire, national desire, racial desire, and something we don't talk much about is the Akashic records. The Akashic records concern the emotional history of our past. See, if we haven't gone through that first pair of opposites and undergone the dualities there of purification, see, and we move into the path of probation, see how difficult and how much longer it's going to be? So if we don't, when we go through that recapitulation time, to remember purification. But no glamour and no illusion can hold us back, those who have set themselves on the task of treading the razor's edge path. Now, let me explain a little bit. The third pair of opposites, meeting the angel and the dweller. This is fought upon the path of initiation. And of course is about meeting the dweller. This constitutes the final pair of opposites where the dweller and the angel of presence face each other. And I can share this much with you, is that the timing element now is transforming this rule in such a way that to some they think that, well, I'm not going to confront and meet the dweller on the threshold until I move into, the third initiation. That is no longer, in my opinion, that is no longer the case. And there are certain reasons for that, which we cannot go into, but you can think about it and intuitively learn about it. So this constitutes the final pair of opposites where the dweller and the angel of presence face each other. It can be defined as a sum total of the forces of the lower nature as expressed in the personality prior to illumination and to the third initiation. What is happening is, because of evolution and the emergency state of existence for the consciousness of humanity, hierarchy is speeding up the process. And I know that sounds a little contradictory when I'm talking about this long length of time spent on the path of probation. So it's a little risky, but we are in an emergency state of existence now, humanity is. So we need more disciples that have the fortitude, the endurance, the determination, the dedication, the commitment to meet this dweller and get it done and go through the transfiguration initiation. So now let's return to the path of probation. At first, as I was saying earlier, recognition of the solar angel may be fleeting and a frustrating short time. Yet, our memory provides an internal resolve to seek the solar angel at any cost. I think this means to many people that had that experience, that fleeting experience, now they're looking for their soulmate. See, and the pop psychology in the spiritual world is misleading people to thinking that a soulmate is another human being. So it may be in a sense, but you'd be really surprised to know truly what a soulmate is. So at this point, let's just say that the hunger a person is trying to feed, that person is the one who had that fleeting experience with their solar angel, and now they want it again. Say, okay, the marriage. It is at this point there is often found a fanatical preoccupation with spiritual matters, like to be a born-again Christian, due to the influence of Race 6. Race 6 is devotion versus fanaticism, another pair of opposites, causing a kind of urgency toward purification. As the probationer strives onward and balance in his or her life, this balance will eventually occur. The probationary path is basically conditioned by Race 6, the array of idealism and devotion to all that is desired and cherished. There's also some help to understand the probationary path in our life through astrology. So I wanted to put that in too, for those of you that study astrology. This is what we are told. The undeveloped humanity is primarily conditioned in its life and circumstances by the influence of the lesser zodiac, and thus by the position of the planets in the 12 houses. I don't have time to, explain all of this. This is basic astrology. But if you really want to learn, send your questions in via email. Okay, that's undeveloped humanity. Lesser zodiac, position of the planets in the houses influence you in your chart. Average intelligent humanity, going from undeveloped humanity to average intelligent humanity, and those nearing the path of discipleship and are on the probationary path, respond consciously to the planets that are affecting their personalities. The planets that are affecting their personalities, the sun sign, which indicates life trends, which are already established and which constitute the line of least resistance. It's your sun sign. Now, it sounds simple, but there's a couple of esoteric factors in there for you to think about. And then the rising sign. The rising sign, in a small measure, will affect you. As you are awakening to your soul and your life purpose. Your rising sign indicates the life goal for this particular life cycle, or over a period of 7 incarnations. And these last 2 points now find you being influenced by the greater zodiac rather than the lesser zodiac. Disciples and initiates can begin consciously to respond to all these influences, handling them constructively, plus those potent yet infinitely subtle forces which pour into our solar system from the Great Bear and the Pleiades and Sirius. In the early stages, the response is found in your subtle bodies, your subtler bodies. But what is happening is that your brain is unable to register, your physical brain is unable to register the influences at this point. But after the third initiation, there is recognition on the physical plane. It's no longer subtle. Okay, now, what does the probationary path mean for us? It is an indication that we are preparing for an entrance into our spiritual heritage. 90% of humanity is living the life of suffering, hating, and exploiting each other for physical, emotional, and mental concerns. Those of us who enter the path of probation will be and are challenged to surpass the revolving merry-go-round of life and make a breakthrough into higher levels of consciousness. It is a time of physical, emotional, and mental testing. We are tested to determine the quality and character of our creativity, our ability, and our talent. We are tested for our solemnity, our patience, our tolerance, and other virtues are put under severe pressure. We are tested for our microbes, any microbes in our nature, such as anger and fear and jealousy and greed or hatred. We are tested for our honesty and openness. We are even tested for our sneakiness. Past temptations are presented to us over and over again to see if we really have conquered our drives and blind urges. From the teachings, I'm reading some quotes now. After a long period of testing, we have an expansion of consciousness. This expansion leads us into heavier responsibilities. If you examine your life, you will notice that every time you were given greater duties or responsibilities, or every time you became more creative and successful, there was a probationary period first. The probationary period is a period of testing and crises. It is a long path on which you meet yourself and eliminate that in you which limits your freedom and your divine expression. On the path of probation, you test your materials for strength and durability and lay your foundation. You can have a really strong foundation, or it can be rotten. A rotten foundation will only earn you lots of hard work for cleaning and repairing later on. But with a solid foundation, there will be no fear in the future. You will never have to go back and rework those same blueprints again. Everything will be in order and in a proper state of repair. If you can withstand the physical, emotional, and mental pressures of the testing period, you are ready then for what? Another round of responsibilities. You know, we are going to run over this morning because that's why we didn't have the verse reading, because I knew it was going to be long. And I know I like to, talk. I was listening to the interview this morning with Barack Obama. He is such an incredibly eloquent man. I don't care how against people are against his policies and things they think he should have done and hasn't done. If you take the eloquence of this man and you put him alongside Donald Trump, you're looking at the past, which is Donald Trump, and our potential future, which is President Obama, what he represents. He talked about his children. He cares, he has feeling. You know, he doesn't condemn, he doesn't damn. You know, he says, I'm just teaching my girls to be kind to people. He's so eloquent and he's so intelligent. And it's that balance. He has the balance of heart and mind. You can have a really strong foundation, or it can be rotten. A rotten foundation will only earn you lots of hard work, like I said, for cleaning and repairing later on. As new responsibilities come to us, watch your bodies. If the emotional body begins to fall into fear, stop it before it enters the black abyss of unnamed doubts and agonies. If it reflects fearful emotions, calm them and heal your centers before they crack. Be ever watchful for weaknesses in your vehicles and repair them with all due haste. When everything is in order and running smoothly, it is an indication that you are ready for great responsibility and greater testing. The emotional body is very tricky and must be kept under constant guard. It must be kept really calm and beautiful and serene. Any shock in the emotional body reflects in your centers and can cause a center to crack. When a center is cracked, the mind then does not function properly. Also, energies are accumulated and translated in a most distorted manner. When this happens, it causes trouble for the whole system. The time of probation must be long enough for everything in your nature to be checked. As your consciousness expands, so does your field of responsibility. Instead of 5 pounds of pressure, you can graduate to 50 pounds of pressure. A person with a really expanded consciousness can withstand 1,000,000 pounds of pressure. As your responsibilities increase, the smallest cracks show within your nature. This is why Master Moria tells us to be careful when carrying the chalice. One little shock can break the chalice. The chalice is the repository of spiritual consciousness and contact with the higher forces. It is the seat of greater contact with the creativity. It's the seat of contact with the creativity of your capital S self. It holds the contact with the genius who is sleeping within your nature. This is your chalice. When you touch this center, you release a tremendous amount of energy and electricity into your system. If your vehicles have small cracks in them, you will not be able to hold the energy and it will escape. So, you're going to face greater difficulties with fearlessness and courage and daring. You're going to be tested for your ability to use your time wisely and to work goal-fittingly. I know we're running out of time. Sorry. your capacity to forgive, and not fall into the rage of anger and revenge will be tried to the limit. So much I could say there. With the responsibilities, when greater responsibilities are given to you, your attitude is going to be carefully monitored. Do you say, I have too much to do right now, find somebody else? Or do you say, you know, I've never done that before, and let me learn. Let me see if I can do this. Or perhaps you may say, you know, this is not in my comfort zone, so sorry. Or do you respond with the spirit of achievement and say, bless this project and those who deemed me worthy of it. I will try my best in a spirit of joy. And I'm going to end there. I have a couple more pages, but I had this note, if you are out of time, stop. So I guess intuitively knew. But that's a lot to think about, and to see, where we stand on this path and so forth. Okay. Maybe later on we can talk more about this.